We still have a couple of minutes before we begin. So we are broadcasting this live on YouTube, so it's going to be strange. I'm going to stand here for a minute and just smile and not move, and then I'll begin the program. So you can watch this afterwards on the YouTube channel. Two minutes, thank you. So although the presenter's in Kansas City, you can still ask questions at the very end of the program. We'll just ask that you use the aisle microphone so we can capture you on the video. Or I'll try, I'm going to actually be standing up here, so I'll try and repeat the question if you don't make your way over to the aisle microphone. But I'm not very good at paraphrasing, so I recommend using the microphone. Welcome to the National Archives Know Your Records program. My name is Andrea Bassing-Matney. We're broadcasting live with our presenter. She's located in Kansas City, Missouri. We're so pleased that you have joined us today. For those of you who are here on site, please use the microphones in the aisle when you ask questions at the end of the program. For those of you who are watching online, you can also ask questions by using the chat feature. You may also find hyperlinks to the presentation slides and live captioning. Our live captioning is brought today by Nicole Koki. For today's presentation, Pamela Anderson will highlight records available through the National Archives, including those that impacted or improved the domestic lives of American citizens. Pamela Anderson joined the National Archives at Kansas City as an archivist in 2010. She spends the majority of her time working at the National Archives underground facility in Lee's Summit, Missouri, where she provides a full range of reference services for the archival records stored there. Pam also performs records description, finding aid creation, accessioning, and preservation tasks. Prior to joining the National Archives, Pam held positions at the Center for Army Lessons Learned at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, the Harley-Davidson Corporate Archives in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and the S.C. Johnson Corporate Archives in Racine, Wisconsin. Pam has a BA in History from Wartburg College in Waverly, Iowa, and an MA in History, specialization in Public History, and a certificate in Museum Studies from the University of Maryland, Wisconsin, Milwaukee. And now for our presentation on diets, textiles, and electricity, records that impacted the domestic lives of American citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our speaker, Pamela Anderson.
Hi, thank you. I'm very excited to have this opportunity to speak to you today. If we go ahead and start on slide 7, the objectives for today, I want to give you a brief introduction to the National Archives at Kansas City. I'm going to highlight some records of government agencies that worked to improve the day-to-day lives of Americans. And then I'm going to give you information on how to request these records. Next slide, slide 8. The National Archives at Kansas City has 4 locations spread out across the greater Kansas City metro. Our main facility is near downtown Kansas City, Missouri. We're next to Union Station, and the majority of our staff is located here. And this is our facility that's open to the public. We have 3 underground locations that are not open to the public, but we have records stored there. We have the Cave facility in northern Kansas City, Missouri. We have another one in Lee Summit, Missouri, and one in Lenexa, Kansas as well. And we have staff at all of these facilities, and I happen to be the staff at the Lee Summit, Missouri facility. So the records of the Central Plains region, the National Archives at Kansas City maintains the records of the Central Plains region, and the Central Plains region consists of the states of Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, and Kansas. But we also have some records from the states of Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. So all archives deal with the space issue. As we take in more and more records, we need more and more space to store those records and materials. And so all archives are always in a constant need of needing more space. Here at the National Archives at Kansas City, we're in kind of the position of having a little extra space. So actually, National Archives offices from across the country store some of their records here, and our staff provide reference services on these records. I do want to note that the records I'm going to be talking about today, I'm sure that there are other government agencies that dealt with these kind of domestic type issues. The agencies that I've chosen to talk about today, I'm talking about them because the records are here and I'm familiar with these records. So don't walk away thinking that these are the only agencies that dealt with kind of these domestic issues, because I'm sure there are many others. Next slide, slide 9. So to get started today, I wanted to talk about the Bureau of Human Nutrition and Home Economics, and this is called record group number 176. A record group is a term that we use to describe all of the records created by a specific agency. So all of the records created by the Bureau of Human Nutrition and Home Economics fall under record group 176. So we're talking about the records of the central office of this agency, the records of the headquarters, so to speak. And the textual records for these series are located here at the National Archives of Kansas City. And there are some series of photographic materials that are available at the National Archives at College Park. So the dates that this series covers is 1915 to 1954. However, it's important to note that the bulk of the records cover the date span of 1917 to 1941. Next slide, slide 10. So the primary mission of this agency was to do a lot of tasks that involve any kind of issue that a homemaker would come across in his or her day-to-day existence. So they conducted a lot of research on the nutritional values of food, what a good diet consists of. They created new recipes, they tested recipes, and they also educated the public on healthy eating. They also conducted research on textiles and clothing, different types of fabric. They studied what fabrics were being used more than other types of fabric. They conducted a lot of research on the use of income and household buying. So really studying how Americans are spending their income and what they're purchasing with their income. And they also did a lot of work with household management and equipment, so studying how homemakers ran their household and what kind of equipment and appliances they used to do their day-to-day tasks. And then finally, the agency also produced a lot of publications on the conservation of food and clothing. And this image that you see up on the slide, it may be a little difficult to read on the screen, but it's a preliminary report published by the Bureau in 1927 in cooperation with the University of Vermont's Extension Service. And it's titled The Average Clothing Expenditures of 86 Farm Families in Franklin County, Vermont during 1923 to 1924. So it's just kind of an example of kind of the things that they looked into and the things that they studied. Next slide, slide 11. So one of the things that I love about this record group is the vast amount of raw data that we have with these records. The Bureau of Home Economics did a lot of studies and surveys on a variety of different topics. And what's great about it is that we not only have the final reports from those studies, but we also have all of the information that they went out and gathered to come up with their final results. So some of the things that they looked at were the use of time on farms. They did a lot of surveys of farm homes, studies of women who lived in towns or on farms. They looked at employer-employee relationships. They did a very large study called the Consumer Purchase Study. And then they also looked at they also did a war emergency food survey during World War I. And usually these surveys start out with, they gather a lot of information about the individuals living in a specific household. So they went out and they got volunteers or families or households from across the country who volunteered to take part in this survey, and they received a packet of forms that they had to fill out. And usually the first page of these forms is taking information about everybody who lived in the household, their ages, their gender, whether or not they were employed, et cetera. So for example, the War Emergency Food Survey started out by taking all of this information down for all of the people who lived in the household. And then it really broke down for an entire week. Everybody in the household had to keep track of everything they ate. And not just the kind of food they ate, but how much of it they ate. So they actually had to weigh everything and then record in ounces how much food was eaten and how much food was left over. So they were also looking at the amount of food that was wasted or at the end of every meal. And then at the end of this survey, then the government looked at all of the data and came up with recommendations for how to better conserve food and redirect those food resources to the war effort. So the image that you see here on the screen is an example of a summary of a week's worth of data for how Mrs. Pearl Ray of Fremont, Michigan, spent all of her time during the week of June 10th through June 16th of 1924. So this is a different survey that they did about how women or homemakers really divided up their time. And there's 3 different categories of time usage here: for work, care of self, and leisure activities. And you can see very clearly the number of hours and minutes she spent doing things like working with livestock and gardening, or how much time she spent sleeping or attending social events and committee meetings and whatnot. Next slide, slide 12. And so here are just some other examples of data sheets that were sent out for various studies. So the image on the top left and then the image on the right side of the screen are both from the study of consumer purchases. So you can see on the top image on the left, it's the first page of this survey where they gather the information of the people living in the household, and then they start in with questions of how much people have spent on specific things. And you can see on the right, they're talking about how much they've spent on their automobiles and other travel and transportation expenses. And the survey goes on in that vein. And then the image on the bottom left-hand side is from the survey of the Farmer Standard of Living studies. So while these different surveys and studies that the Bureau undertook, they were obviously commissioned for a specific reason. You know, they're trying to answer a set of specific questions. But I really think for scholars and researchers looking at domestic type issues during this time period, there's a lot of great data here that I feel like could really be useful in someone's research. Next slide, slide 13. So another big group of records for the Bureau of Home Economics is there's several series of correspondence records, and these records cover just the wide range of activities that the Bureau undertook. And I've put just a few examples on this slide that I'll talk about. It's in no way exhaustive of everything that they did, but hopefully this kind of gives you an idea of some of the other things that the Bureau worked on. So the pamphlet on the top left corner of the screen, Eggs at Any Meal. This is a leaflet that they produced and published and distributed, where they had developed several recipes featuring eggs for various meals during the day, and distributed that to the public. The next image, moving right, I'm sure it's hard to read on the screen, but the Bureau did a study of the nutritional value of wheat germ and really looked at what good came out of people eating more wheat germ. And then they developed several recipes that used wheat germ, and then they published this and distributed it to Americans. The next image to the right is this article I really personally enjoy. It's called Is This Housewife Worth Her Salt? It was written by Hildegard Nieland, who is an employee of the Bureau, and it was published in the Survey Graphic magazine in December of 1929. What this article is a fictionalized conversation of a fictional couple. It's about 7.5 pages long, so it's a lengthy article. And what this conversation is about is that this woman received a job offer, and so she is trying to convince her husband that she should work outside the home. And the husband is coming back with all of these economic reasons why it doesn't make sense for her to work outside the home, because he's going to have to be spending a lot of his money hiring maids and cooks to do all of the work that she could do just by staying at home. And as the conversation goes on, she's explaining why it actually makes a lot of economic sense for her to take a second job, because a lot of the things that homemakers stayed at home to do aren't necessary now. She points out that she doesn't need to make all of their clothes by hand because it's actually cheaper to buy pre-made clothes in the stores. And she doesn't need to do all of the canning because when you break down the expenses, it's actually cheaper for her to buy all that food in the grocery store than it is to stay home and can it herself. So as this conversation evolves, she eventually proposes the idea that the husband pay her a salary if she's going to stay at home and manage the household. Then he needs to pay her for that work. And she lays out very clearly why it makes good sense for her to receive a salary for being a housewife. And by the end, he agrees to it. He realizes that it makes sense to pay her and then split all of the household expenses in half, and they each paying 50% towards the household budget. So the image on the top right side of the page is an advertisement for a manufacturer of washing machines, and this kind of illustrates another aspect of the Bureau's work. They looked at a lot of appliances to see which ones were most beneficial for helping homemakers. And they started a program where they actually went out and they bought many different models of sewing machines, and then they set up a showroom with all these sewing machines in them, and they invited home economics teachers and professors to come and view all of these sewing machines in one location. And they also had invited some housewives to come and look as well. The idea being that with everything together in one place, these people could really study the different models that were available, the different features that were available, and then would go back and educate their students about what was available in the world of sewing machines. And they had such great success with this program that they decided to look into other appliances. So this image on the slide here was acquired during their effort to set this up for washing machines. The Bureau realized fairly early on they couldn't afford to buy all of these different models of washing machines. So they reached out to washing machine manufacturers and asked them to loan them, asked to borrow a washing machine to put in their showroom. And in the correspondence with the companies, you see the companies acknowledging that, yeah, this would be great. We'd love this kind of exposure, especially at the level of having these home economics teachers come in, because they are going to turn around and hopefully promote their product to their students. And another example that I like to mention is that they're almost in some ways, maybe unofficially, a consumer watchdog. I came across some records once of some consumers were concerned about a specific brand of bread that they could buy in the stores because there was some information on the packaging that they just weren't sure about. So they wrote into the Bureau, and the Bureau studied this, and the manufacturer of the bread was actually claiming that it had some great nutritional value that I can't think of off the top of my head. But the Bureau tested the bread and figured out that it didn't meet what the manufacturer's claims. So the company actually had to modify their packaging and not make such misinformed claims about their bread. And so I guess one of the things that I really like about these records is that the issues that you see in these records are a lot of the same issues that we still talk about today. Everybody is still trying to find what foods contain the most nutritional value. Everybody's trying to strike a balance with a healthy diet. When we go out, when we need to purchase a new refrigerator, hopefully we do our market research and look at the different models to see which one's going to work best for our household. And also, people today are very concerned that the packaging of their food lists all of the ingredients correctly, and that they want to be aware of what's in their food. So another great so what's great about these records is that even though that this was quite a while ago, these records are still really reflective of the same issues that we all deal with today. Next slide, slide 14. So moving on, I want to talk a little bit about the Rural Electrification Administration, and this is record group 221. Again, I'm talking about the records at the central office of the agency, or the headquarters. And the location for these records, most of the textual records are here in the National Archives of Kansas City, although there are a very few number of series that are at the National Archives at College Park. And then there are some series of photographic materials and maps and charts that are available through the Still Pictures branch and the Cartographic branch, both of which are also at the National Archives at College Park. And the dates covered by these records are 1935 to 1985. Next slide, slide 15. So the primary mission of the Rural Electrification Administration was much more narrow than the mission of the Bureau of Home Economics. In the early 30s, the government began to realize that there was still a large population in this country of people who didn't have access to electricity because they were living in really rural areas of the country. So they began doing some work in 1933, sort of kind of informally, to try to get electricity to these rural areas. And in 1935, they established a temporary agency to do this work. But then it turned around in 1936 and established a formal permanent agency. So what this agency did was they provided low-interest loans for activities like building electric generating plants and transmission lines, wiring homes and buildings, and acquiring and installing electrical and plumbing equipment. So preference for these loans were given to individual farmers, farmers cooperatives, and utility districts. And then starting in 1949, they also provided assistance to cooperative telephone companies so that people in these rural areas were also getting access to telephone lines. And this agency was abolished in 1994, and it was superseded by the Rural Utilities Service. Next slide, slide 16. So most of the records in this record group really deal with the day-to-day administrative tasks of the agency. But there was a portion of the agency that really kind of worked in education and outreach. Because if you think about it, if your house isn't wired for electricity and you've never lived in a place with electricity, there's actually a lot that you need to do to get everything set up. And there's a lot of things you have to think about that we take for granted at this day and age. So at the top left of the slide is a brochure that the agency published and distributed, called A Bathroom for Every Farm. And this brochure goes on to talk about how, now that you've got electricity in your house, it's a great time to put in an indoor bathroom. And it talks about how they can find a small closet somewhere in their house or some room that can be converted. And it talks about the type of things that are included in a bathroom, like a sink or a shower or a bathtub. And talks about the benefits of good water pressure. So the image in the bottom middle of the screen is a pamphlet that they produced and distributed that just talks about the different kind of light fixtures that you need in each room. Again, it's not something we really give a whole lot of thought to. It's kind of second nature to know that you need a light fixture in your bedroom. But these are things that were brand new to some of these people. So this particular pamphlet is broken down by it recommends fixtures for different rooms, and then it also gives it ideas for fixtures and lamps in different price ranges. So hopefully to appeal to a broad scope of people. And the image at the top right of the screen is a woman here who's talking about how she likes her modern Monday. But really this whole pamphlet is talking about how Mondays were the day that she did all of her laundry. But now that she has electricity in her house, and now that she has an electric washing machine, laundry days are so much easier on her. There's much less actual physical work that needs to be done. And she can save the time and energy she would have spent doing laundry to do her other weekly tasks and maybe even some new activities that she never had time for before. So this is a common theme that you see through a lot of their promotional material, is the idea of modernization, modernizing their farms and their homes. Some of the other material that you see distributed by the agency is informational pamphlets on how farmers can build their own electrical equipment, so they're not necessarily having to go out and buy everything. They had an instructional pamphlet on how to build their own lamps, how to build their own egg coolers. And a lot of the material you see being distributed to farmers is really saying, like, yes, it does cost a few cents to use this electricity. However, the amount of time and energy you're saving doing some of these tasks can be redirected to other areas of the farm that might need improvement. Next slide, slide 17. So like I said before, the majority of the records in this record group deal with the administrative tasks of getting electricity out to all of these outlying areas. It's a lot of different correspondence and papers of certain supervisors within the different departments of the agency. But there are several series of what they're calling project case files. So a case file would be if a loan was given to a specific co-op, then that file would contain all of the paperwork dealing with that particular co-op. So correspondence between the co-op and the agency, correspondence between the co-op and the project supervisors that were located in the states and the territories. And, they have other records like approval of expenditures and other matters related to setting up and equipping the project, and also records dealing with the technical and legal aspects of getting all this electricity up and running. Other project case files pertain to the actual loans that were given. They'll have records like applications and recommendations and feasibility of the project in question. One thing I would like to say about these records is that I have had a few requests over the last few years from people who are hoping to find information about a relative of theirs in these records. And while it wouldn't be impossible to find a relative, it's certainly not going to be easy. These aren't records that lend themselves well to genealogy. There's just not that kind of personal data for individuals in these records. In order to find a relative, you would have to know for sure that they had a very high-ranking and active role in their local co-op, and that their co-op received a loan from the Rural Electrification Administration. Now, if you are very serious about finding your relative in these records, I highly suggest that you come and visit us in person and look through the records yourself, or you hire an independent researcher to search on your behalf, because it's really going to take a lot of reading of every page to find names of potential relatives, and it's really a level of research that we can't provide for you. That it's something that you really need to come in and do for yourself, because it is such detailed work. Next slide, slide 18. I wanted to talk to you very briefly today about the records of the Patent Office. The Patent and Trademark Office is Record Group 241, and while the mission of this agency wasn't dealing specifically with the domestic lives of Americans, they were issuing patents to inventors who certainly were creating inventions and all kinds of things that are helping domestic lives. And so all of the administrative records for Record Group 241 are at the National Archives at College Park. What I want to talk about today are the actual patent case files themselves, because most of the RG 241 records at the National Archives at Kansas City are patent case files for utility patents and design patents. And patent case files usually contain like the initial application for the patents and the petition and the oath, and then correspondence between the inventor and their legal representation with the patent office. And then also you will find the published descriptions and drawings. So, for example, the image that's on this page is the published drawing of this design. This is a design patent. So whoever came up with this design for this dress decided that he needed to patent it. And it really looks to me like they put a hoodie on the back of this dress. Either that or it's some sort of little cape, but it really looks like a hoodie to me. And the person that designed the dress thought it was a significant enough design that they should get it patented. Next slide, slide 19. So utility patents, as defined by the Patent Office, are issued for the invention of a new and useful process, machine, manufacture, or composition of matter, or a new and useful improvement thereof. And our patent case files span 1836 to 1993, but it's really important to note that the bulk of this series ends in March of 1976. And the patent that you see on the screen here is for eyeglasses for chickens. It's a particular favorite of some of us in our office here. When the glass in the frame of the glasses was actually tinted red, and that calmed the chickens down and made them less likely to attack each other when wearing these glasses. Next slide, slide 20. So design patents are issued for a new, original, and ornamental design embodied in or applied to an article of manufacture. And it permits its owner to exclude others from making, using, or selling that design. And the design patent files span from 1843 to 1973. So basically, the difference between a utility patent and a design patent is that a utility patent is an invention for something new, and a design patent is basically just a new look or design for something that already exists. The example that I like to use is a chair. So a chair has already been invented. So you wouldn't get a utility patent necessarily for a chair. But if somebody came up with a different design for a chair, then they might take out a design patent for that chair, so nobody else could produce that design that they've come up with. Next slide, slide 21. So you can use patent case files for some genealogy purposes. If you have an ancestor that has a patent, most likely their signature is going to be in the file. They provide you with an opportunity to learn about your ancestor's professional and intellectual work, and they may contain some geographical information about your ancestor. Next slide, slide 22. So searching for patents has been made really easy thanks to Google. Google has a patent search engine that contains patents from 6 different patent offices in 6 different countries across the world, the United States being one of them. So if you're interested in patents and you want to take a look around, go use the Google's search engine for patents. And you can use this in any number of ways. You can search by the patent number. Each patent is assigned a number. And if you know that number, you can search by it. You can search by the name of the individual or the company. So if there's some rumor in your family that great-grandpa may have had a patent at one point, but you don't know anything else about it, you can just search his name and see what comes up. You can also search by the type of invention. So if you were really interested in the evolution of the egg beater, you could type in egg beaters and see what patents come up for that. I had an example of a patent for an egg beater on a previous slide. One thing that I'd like to point out is that if you're interested in contacting us to get copies of a patent case file or to come and see one in person, and you're using Google, make sure that you need to make sure that the patent that you're interested in is actually a patent from the United States, because we don't have copies of foreign patents. So the easiest way to do that within Google is when the hits come up from your search, you'll see I have circled in red at the bottom of the screen. A U.S. patent will have U.S. in front of the patent number, and a design patent will have USD in front of the patent number. And if you decide you'd like to make a request for patent files, please include as much information in your request as you can. If you were able to find it in using Google patent search, include the patent case number, the name of the inventor, and the type of invention, along with the date of the patent if possible. Next slide, slide 23. So I want to talk to you a little bit about requesting records from us. I strongly encourage you to start your search using the National Archives catalog. I know there have been plenty of talks about how to use the catalog, so I'm not going to get too much into that because you can find that information online. But there is one tip that I wanted to share with you today. I always suggest that you use the advanced search. And when you use the advanced search, you can actually search by record group number. And I have that field circled in red on the screen. So for example, if after today you've decided that there's something within the Bureau of Home Economics that you want to know more about, you can go ahead and, using the advanced search, put in 176 under the record group number, and then any other search terms that you want to search by. And then that ensures that you are only looking at records within the Bureau of Home Economics, that any of the other hits that you're getting are not from a different record group that maybe you're not interested in at the moment. So it's a really great field, and it's something that I use all the time. I use that search field all of the time here at work, and it's something that I always encourage researchers to use too, if they can. Next slide, slide 24. Another thing about the National Archives catalog that I wanted to kind of highlight today is the location information within a series description. So I have a screenshot here of a series description. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the entire description into one screenshot, so I had to break it up here, split it in half. But say you've searched for Bureau of Home Economics records, and you decide that you're interested in the Consumer Purchase Study records. So you're looking at this series description. Make sure you scroll to the bottom, because at the bottom of the description, it lists where within the National Archives those records are stored. And then it also gives you the contact information for that location. And I feel it's important to mention this because, as I described earlier, some of these series of records for these record groups are in College Park, and some of them are here in Kansas City. So by making sure you have confirmed in the series description the location of the records, you can contact that office directly, and it's really going to make finding your records just a lot easier and faster. Next slide, slide 25. So just some general information on requesting records from us. We ask that you, if you're sending emails, please send it to kansascity.archives@nara.gov. Kansas City is smushed together as one word. And I've included our physical address on the screen in case you'd like to send us a written request through the mail, and our general phone number as well in case you would prefer to talk to someone in person. So our main location is open to the public from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. We're closed on weekends and federal holidays. And if you decide that you want to send in a written request to us, I ask that you just include as much information as you possibly can about what you're looking for. If you've searched the National Archives catalog ahead of time and you've identified a series that way that you want to see, include that information so we can find it in the catalog as well, or just give us as much as you know. Now, one of our archivists might get back to you if we have some additional questions and we can start a conversation, but the more you start out with providing us, the more it's going to expedite us finding you what you need. So if you would decide that you'd like to come here and visit us in person and look at the records yourself, we're happy to have you come visit. We love having researchers come on site here. We ask that you please contact us before you visit. Now, we certainly do help walk-ins, but it's really better for you and it's better for us if you contact us ahead of time. This way, you can talk to an archivist about your research. They can really help you narrow down focus and maybe even make some suggestions of records that you hadn't thought of before. But it's really a good idea to know that you're coming ahead of time. And one of the reasons for that is really because the majority of our records are stored in our off-site facilities. So if you show up here without letting us know ahead of time, there's a really good chance that the records you want to see aren't going to be here on site. So we actually request that you submit your request of the records that you want to see at least 2 business days in advance. And when you do this, this gives us the time that we need to pull those records and transport them to our research room. We really want everything to be ready to go for you when you arrive. So when you get here bright and early, your first morning of your visit, you can come in and sign in and look at the research room rules, and then you're ready to go. We can pull your records out to you right away, and you can go ahead and get started. So it's a really contacting us ahead of time and getting and allowing us that time to transport your records before you arrive is really helping you use your time more efficiently. Now, you are welcome to request additional boxes once you arrive. We will need a little bit of time to pull them and transport them, but you absolutely are able to request more records once you come here. But we just do like you to already have some on site ready to go, so you have something to be working on while waiting for those additional records to come. So next slide, slide 26. So that's everything that I have prepared to talk to you about today. Do you have any questions for me?
Gina, thank you so much for your presentation. You really captured my imagination. I knew that the patent records were available online, but I wasn't familiar with Record Group 176, Bureau of Human Nutrition and Home Economics. And it looks to me like I'm not the only one that captured the imagination of another audience member. Online, we have a question that came in. She writes, is there a link to a finding aid or the NARA catalog that explains what is available in Record Group 176? And she follows up with another question about is it available? Has any of that collection been digitized?
The collection really hasn't been digitized yet. It will get to it eventually, but as of right now, it's not. There's not necessarily a link online that I know of with finding aids for the record group. you know, like I said, you can always search the catalog for using the record group field for, you know, type in 176 and then any other search terms you may have. And you can certainly see all of the series descriptions that way. And you also can feel free to contact us, and we can get you additional finding aids, and we can send it directly to the researcher.
Thank you, Pamela. Do we have any questions from our on-site audience for Pamela Anderson while we still have her online? If not, if you think of a question that occurs to you later on, that's fine. You can send it to our email address, inquire@nara.gov. Again, inquire@nara.gov. And let me check one more time online to see if we have any more questions that have come in. And it looks like that you did a very thorough job. Thank you very much, Pamela, for your presentation. This recording will remain online on YouTube, and the presentation slides will also be available, so you can always watch it later. So thank you again for attending. This concludes today's program. Okay, we're clear. Thank you for attending.
You smile very well behind.